This apple represents Avatar Last Airbender. As you can tell, it's flawless. Good skin, no dents, completely organic, and the best part, tastes delicious. Now you know you can't go wrong. From the skin to its core, it is an amazing apple. Now what if I told you I can get you an apple from the same farm? Scratch that, I can get you an apple from the same tree, from the same vine, picked by the same farmer, and shipped to you in the same truck. Would you eat that apple?
I don't like apples.
Damn. This apple represents the legend of Korra. It looks just as good as the original, right? In fact, I'd say its skin looks even better. See, there's just one problem though. It's got a couple bruises in it. Do you want to eat this apple?
No, I don't like apples.
Eat the apple. Now would you say that apple is good?
It was meh.
Well, why? It was the same as the other apple, it just had a few bruises in it.
Yeah, but I mean, those bruises were pretty annoying to get through.
Why would you say it's a good apple?
Because I had a lot of bruises on it.
All the good qualities, the texture, the skin, the taste, all of it was good.
I mean, all I remember are the bruises.
And that, my friends, is The Legend of Korra in an Apple. A good show, but the flaws stick out way more than its strengths. And this was just season 1. Now, let's check out season 2. Now, to get everyone on the same page, I will now, with minimal snark and tangents, summarize the events of season 2. This will spoil things, and that is your only spoiler warning for a show that aired 8 years ago. Alright, let's begin. This season takes place 6 months after season 1 ended. Korra can now use all 4 elements, but hasn't put it together that air blasts don't equal mastery. She can also use the Avatar state for unexplained reasons, most likely because it got nerfed between series and now it's just a generic power-up. Taking a family vacation to her hometown for the holidays, she meets back up with her parents and her uncle, who is the chief of the Northern Water Tribe. His name is Unalaq, and he's the worst. With 2 default settings, confused rambling about how he owns the South, think Queen of England and Canada, and preaching endlessly about the spirits, which we find out this season have been reduced to generic Pokemon. A spirit attacks, but Unalaq uses water therapy to subdue it. He also reveals that Korra's 14 years of house arrest wasn't Aang's idea, but Tenzin's and her dad's. No one feels like revealing that the reason why this happened was because there's a shadow conspiracy out to kidnap the Avatar. So Korra, out of development and father figures, is now only listening to her creepy religious uncle. Korra is also dating Mako at this time, and it's painful, as Mako continues to be generic, while Korra is written to be incredibly bitchy and short-tempered with everyone around her, to make her mid-season transition more pronounced. But this move only succeeded in alienating her supporters and galvanizing her haters. Next, they take a field trip to the center of the South Pole to unlock a spirit portal that will let people physically walk into the spirit world, reducing the spirit realm to Wonderland and trading mystery for oversaturation. Korra gets the portal open, finds out her dad was exiled for war crimes, and flooding a forest that causes spirits to attack. Also, Unalaq has brought an entire fleet to invade the South Pole, in the name of peace. Brain-dead Korra is letting all this happen as the South Pole starts to look a lot like 50s Algeria. Believing that her sketchy uncle will sort things out, she is completely blind to what's going on, even rescuing her uncle from some freedom fighters. Korra's parents get jailed for association, and despite her mom getting clemency thanks to her uncle, everyone else gets life imprisonment. During all this, Asami has her subplot about saving her company for the 100th time, but this is only an excuse to bring in Varrick, a rich entrepreneur who gets some of the best laughs in the show. Himbo Bolin, lacking any motivation or agency, gets into an abusive relationship with Eska, Unalaq's daughter and Mai's clone. Seeing her family get oppressed makes Korra finally turn against her uncle, who's gone full generic supervillain. There, Korra fails to start a war because the president doesn't want to get involved with any of this mess. Mako, lacking any skills outside of beating people up and being extremely self-important, has naturally joined the cops. Spills the beans about Korra's plan to team up with Zuko's 37-year-old grandson, Iroh, who was about to betray his country to use his fleet to help the Avatar. Korra and Mako finally break up and become seafood. Waking up in a Fire Nation commune whose only medical treatment is pit therapy, where we turn back the clock on all the previous avatars to meet the first, Avatar Wan, who's just Aladdin with worse hair. This leads into the backstory that no one wanted, and after watching it, really didn't want. In ancient times, humanity lived on the lion turtles, who would give people bending whenever they left the turtle to hunt for food. Despite this small subsistence lifestyle, the communities flourished into advanced city-states. Wan, after stealing fire in a Prometheus reference, gets caught and cast out into the spirit lands, where he meets up with a group of spirits led by a painfully unfunny Thundercats character.
Stinky.
The name is Juan.
Stinky is more accurate.
A few years go by, and when Juan is wandering the world, he finds two spirits fighting, deciding to split them apart, only for it to turn out that the spirit he just freed is the embodiment of darkness and chaos. Oof. Later, he and the light spirit Rava team up as Juan learns all the elements, but is only able to use one at a time. His spirit and human friends kill each other, and this isn't because the humans were encroaching on the spirit's land, but because Vaatu corrupted them and pushed them to do bad things. Because what's personal accountability? Rava and Juan fused to beat Vaatu, sealing him in a tree during something called harmonic convergence. A pointless ticking clock, right up there with Hades freeing the Titans. Now awake, Korra rushes to meet up with Tenzin, who has been reconnecting with his siblings while also building a relationship with his kids. Back in the Boredom City, where Mako is investigating a bombing on his own because Lin trusts the advice of obviously crooked cops. He's also back together with Asami, because the love triangle was everyone's favorite part of season 1. Bolin has become a movie star in Varrick's films, not because it adds anything to the story. The writers just don't know what to do with Bolin, so they keep throwing him into wacky situations. Mako, in a waste of time B-plot, figures out Varrick is the bomber, and has bought Asami's company so they both can be war profiteers together. Mako gets set up, Bolin stops Varrick from kidnapping the president, Korra reappears, and then everyone pretends none of this ever happened. Especially Mako, who's now back together with Korra, because she has amnesia and forgot they broke up. Why is this a thing? It's a love triangle. It always appears where it's never needed or wanted. Korra gets a spirit tour from Jinora, who apparently is super attuned to spirits, outshining her dad. The field trip goes awry when Jinora gets kidnapped after meeting a cameo, while Korra meets up with the original Iroh, who is inexplicably in this season. After a quick pep talk, Korra opens the other spirit portal, because what's the world to the life of one child? Now, we're all set up for the big final battle. They head down south by wasting more time by having Mako not tell Korra that they're technically not together anymore. Fighting the northern forces, they lose. Unalaq reveals his grand plan.
A dark avatar.
So now dark avatars are a thing, and it's as stupid as it sounds. Boomy frees everyone because he's good at playing the flute. Vaatu gets freed, fusing with Unalaq, and fights Korra. He wins thanks to tentacles, and destroys Korra's past lives, plus Rava, transforming into a giant spirit monster. Fuck. Oh. He goes full Godzilla and starts his reign of terror by knocking over the Statue of Liberty. Back in the spirit world, a very vulnerable Korra realizes she messed up, and her arc about getting in touch with her spiritual side is ended thanks to one speech from Tenzin. Korra has learned nothing about spirituality besides having a coma dream and meditating one time, but she can bend the energy within herself, which is a phrase so vague the writers are able to interpret it into her making a giant spirit form to fight Unalaq with laser beams. Korra almost loses, but then Jinora comes down from heaven to be Jesus and save the day, using a teacup that was referenced barely once and never brought up again. Revealing a bit of Rava is inside Vaatu. Korra is the Avatar again and uses Unalaq's own spirit water BS to destroy him. Later, Korra decided to keep the spirit portals open, not because anyone wanted this to happen, but she needs to be different from Juan, and the writers needed this to happen so airbenders can come back in season 3. Korra gives a speech, and we end on a shot of spirits flying around in a scene that is supposed to evoke wonder, but as we found out earlier, if one of these things pass through people, then they mutate into horrifying monsters. Man, coming off of season 1, they really...
What the hell was that?
When the first storytellers were creating myths and legends, they took inspiration from their surroundings, mix and matching characteristics from creatures that their audience would know. This was the approach that the original Avatar adhered to when they designed the spirits. Centipedes with human faces, giant animals, all things that, while surreal, would still believably exist in their world. And then when Legend of Korra came out, they gave us Studio Ghibli leftovers. These designs are not bad, but they miss the point of the original entirely. The artist wanted to give the spirits a looser, less well-defined form, making them appear as if they were made of energy, excluding an alien presence completely detached from the world. And while I'm sure this motif appeals to some people, This degree of separation goes against everything that we've learned about the Avatar world. Balance is an idea that was constantly brought up in the original. Spirits are as much a part of the human world as humans were, with the Avatar being responsible with maintaining the balance between them. The Avatar is not a border cop. It is not their job to keep these two worlds separate. It's helping the two sides coexist, where the true challenge of being the Avatar lies. The original show carried this topic with a great sense of mysticism and respect. They were alien yet familiar, separate from our world yet also an integral part of it. In Korra though, it tries its hardest to make it seem like maybe these worlds should be separate. The designs of the spirits in Korra are the epitome of this misunderstanding, a failure to understand their own world and story. The designs of the spirits were an intentional choice, and for the first time ever, it wasn't about the merchandise. No, they had to keep the designs simple so it'd be easier to turn them evil. This is probably the real reason that the spirits look the way they do. Season 2 is all about the spirits, and what's better than normal spirits? Dark spirits. They aren't evil, they've been corrupted by Spirit Satan. See, they aren't at fault, they're harmless, and just want to be left alone. It's this thing making them all crazed with the darker palette and monochrome look. No, I can't take these things seriously. The concept of dark spirits was something that was hinted at in the original Avatar series. We saw it through examples like Heibai and the Ocean Spirit, that when aggravated, spirits would fight back, taking on monstrous new forms that better reflect their rage. But here's the thing, when it was done in Avatar, they were not corrupted by an outside force. It was a reflection of their mental state. When this is presented in Korra, it's corruption. This isn't how they're supposed to be at all, and it has to be forced on them. While in the original, from subtext, this was something all spirits naturally did. And I much more appreciate the older looks because they felt like a more natural extension of the spirits. And to keep the use of metaphors, let's take a look at the human face. We as humans have access to so many different facial expressions. Some can be so different, you'd be surprised they belong to the same person. Spirits in Avatar were the perfect manifestation of this idea. Heibai, after losing their forest, was so twisted by anger for losing their home that their body changed shape, becoming something monstrous. But even then, it still retains that glimpse of who they were before. But if it was done in Korra, they would just change color. And this is why the spirit designs are so much more loosely designed when compared to the more grounded ones in Avatar. It's just so much easier to create a standard look for both evil and normal spirits. This was all done for the sake of shorthand. If we see a spirit like Heibai in the original, we don't know if that's the spirit's default state or its enraged form. But by making all the spirits look the same and making the dark spirits so on the nose, the audience can immediately distinguish between the two. The shorthand, though, came at the expense of the spirits themselves, stripping them of that mystique that was just built into them. When I first saw Ko the Face Sealer, I was terrified. His presence commanded fear, yet kind of also had this strange beauty to it. Ko was one of the oldest of the spirits, and I believed that, as everything about him harkened back to some primordial being. I can imagine ancient hunters would scare children with images like this around the campfire. He was mysterious, but also real. The designs in Korra reference anime. While cute and cuddly in their own way, they don't evoke any emotion from me. And from the first moment they were shown, I knew that the artist had made the wrong choice.
Now, whether or not what we experienced was an according to Hoyle miracle is insignificant. But what is significant is I felt the touch of God. God got involved.
But why?
For conspiring to assassinate me.
Each season of Korra has a specific theme or idea. Season 1 was equality, 3, freedom, and Season 2 was spirituality. But unlike equality or freedom, spirituality is a much more nebulous concept. Is being spiritual recognizing that there's a higher power, a belief in God? Or is it smaller than that, an understanding that there's something just beyond our physical forms? According to Dr. Maya Spencer, spirituality involves a recognition of a feeling or sense or belief that there is something greater than myself, something more to being human than sensory experiences, and the greater whole of which we are part is cosmic or divine in nature. What is spirituality in Avatar? Or more specifically, what is spirituality to Korra? Korra starts the season with no respect for tradition or the spiritual side of being the Avatar, succeeding with innate talent and drive alone. While season 1 would have you believe she started down a path to rebuilding herself and is starting to understand the spiritual side of being the Avatar, this isn't what happened. She's reckless and impulsive, obsessed with being a great Avatar, with no idea of how to do so. Korra thinks of things in very simple terms. She sees a bad guy, she punches him. She sees a problem, she fixes it, never asking the question of why or if there's a peaceful alternative. Season 2 is about Korra learning to become more attuned to the spirits, to the world, and to herself. At this, the season fails utterly. The problem with this show is that it has a serious case of right message, wrong genre. It's an action-adventure show. Where Avatar had the runtime to slow down and explore these questions, Korra doesn't. This leaves her spiritual journey to be less of a character study and more fortune cookie advice being thrown at her by old men. Korra is never given time to breathe and meditate on anything. This results in every spiritual milestone being broken down into side quests that Korra needs to complete before moving on to the final boss. Entering the spirit world, Jinora helped her through that. Contacting the other avatars, Koma and Monks did that. Bending the energy within herself, she does that, but jumps the shark in the process. This story could have worked, but not with this writing and pacing. It's frustrating to watch, as Avatar handled this aspect so well, then to see the same team fail again is disappointing. But still not as disappointing as what the team did to Korra though. Let's talk about my girl Korra. Now there's a very vocal part of the fandom that hates Korra. They just don't gel with her personality. Her brashness and cockiness just aren't mixed in enough with her heroic traits, they say. Which is fine. People have opinions, and arguing on the internet is a waste of time. But I really like Korra. To me, her journey from being that arrogant prep kid to the more world-weary survivor we see at the end is one of the show's biggest achievements. I was always engaged with Korra's story and thought she was a solid successor to Aang. The writers were able to thread the needle for Korra, showing that she's not just a brash punk, but she has a great sense of vulnerability and love to her. Then they made her a bitch in season 2.
Of course you take his side.
I guess you should do what you think is right.
Oh, thanks. That's a big help. Then what are we waiting for? We'll never finish training with him in charge.
This is outrageous. It's unfair. How can you be on the council and not be a master?
Fun fact, The Legend of Korra was originally only going to be a miniseries. That's right, season 1 and done. The writers, I'm sure, had an idea where they could go after, but nothing concrete. And you feel that divide in the narrative, where the final 3 seasons all flow naturally one into the other, with the events of each season being a direct consequence of the one before it. Season 1 has fuck all to do with season 2 other than it setups the characters. Season 2 feels like a second season 1 rather than a second season. This affects the story in the worst way possible, as all the events of this season are tethered to setting up future storylines and dynamics rather than dealing with the main story. But by far, the biggest casualty of this shift in gears was Korra herself. Having undergone significant growth in the last season, being humiliated and humbled while growing into a semi-functional adult, in season 2, she starts as her worst self, with none of that prior growth. Gone is the person who had grown to respect Tenzin and appreciate her friends, to someone who vindictively turns on everyone who disagrees with her, falling in with the first yes man that starts telling her everything she wants to hear. While she often had a reason to be angry with the people around her, Mako did in fact do his job and rat her out to the president, and Tenzin did in fact decide to keep her on house arrest for the first 14 years of her life. Character interactions are always contrived with people acting as the plot needs them to, rather than the plot changing based on the characters. Negative character progression is a thing, and could have made for an interesting arc. But this regression for Korra is dropped as soon as it's convenient for the plot. Korra gets a 2-episode origin story, snaps back to a character who somewhat feels like they went through the events of season 1. Korra is functionally 2 different characters in the first and second halves of the season. So I don't buy the idea that there was ever an arc that she needed to learn from or grow. It was all for the plot, which is awful. But you know what, it's okay. At least we got the love triangle back, right? Anyone?
Don't judge me.
For everyone that hasn't watched The Legend of Korra Season 1, there is one point that nearly everyone can agree on. which was that the harem plotline about everyone trying to get into Mako or Korra's panties was a waste of time. But then it ended. Mako left Asami for Korra, who shot down Bolin because she has a thing for bad boys. The expectation then was that we would see Mako and Korra be a couple and see how their relationship would develop. That was something that Avatar had never really done. Gintara and Aang got together, but we never saw them be in a relationship. It was an exciting prospect to see how they would handle this. And how did it work out?
You betrayed me and my family!
Poorly. Now I am not a Makora stan. To me, they've always felt like a pity Zutara. But that didn't mean I wanted to see their relationship implode the way it did. From Mako and Korra's first conversation together, they're arguing from the start. The writers are trying so hard to show us why they shouldn't be together. Then when Mako betrays Korra, she responds by trashing his office, causing them to break up. As you do. Is it sad? Kind of. But it is the natural conclusion for the relationship they had. But what happens next is where the real problems start. Because a few days after they break up, Mako is back together with Asami, pretty much because they're just both lonely. I had originally thought this relationship ran its course, but okay. They were right the first time. Let's see how they build up, and Korra's back with amnesia. Mako isn't explaining that they aren't together, so now we have a love triangle all over again. I think the writers have a fundamental misunderstanding of love triangles. Because in a love triangle, we have to want at least one pair of the characters to end up together. Korra and Mako we have already seen as a couple. Mako and Asami are dating just so the story has an excuse to have them in the same scene. This is why the love triangle especially fails in season 2, because they bring back the worst aspect of season 1, then make it worse by stripping all the chemistry out of the characters, while holding it together with plot-convenient amnesia. When Korra and Mako break up again, I'm not sad in the slightest. My only reaction when I watched this the first time was thank God. It baffles me why they brought this stupid plot point back. But after sitting on it and really thinking about it, I believe I have the answer. The reason for all of our misery. And it's 2 words. Amiable exes. Look, here's the problem. They were never going to break up this Team Avatar. You can't have Korra and Mako be these bitter exes who are angry at each other and barely want to talk. So, what's their other option? They had to end the relationship amicably. But rather than having anyone own up to their wrongdoing, the story uses amnesia to get Korra and Mako through the angry exes phase. So they can then have its tragic, oh, it's sad that things didn't work out. Meanwhile, Asami is stuck in the wing, not doing anything till the plot calls on her again. I did not need Mako and Korra to break up, but I wanted their story and relationship to feel like it mattered, that their choices meant something. But when it ended in season 2, all these relationships, everything just fell apart, with no character wanting to touch this mess. If the story ended with Korra and Mako still being mad at each other, I would have respected that ending, because it would have created such great opportunities for growth. But instead, they cleared the board to bring it back to a status quo they thought everyone would be comfortable with. No growth, no change, just more of the same old. But speaking of growth, let's talk about a character who doesn't get any. For the non-gamers out there, DLC stands for downloadable content. It's an add-on to your main game that adds new characters and story, that at the end of the day, has zero effect on the actual events. For example, take Sebastian Vale from Dragon Age 2. He's your typical choir boy prince whose closest connection is this nun who proceeds to get blown up at the end of the game.
Elfina, no! Mako, no!
His entire life is shattered, and absolutely no one reacts to this. He gets ignored by the rest of the characters, who continue on with their pre-scripted lines. This is Asami in Season 2. Her plotline of saving her company, only to have it nearly be stolen by Varrick, contributes nothing. It has no point outside of giving Mako and Bolin something to do. You can cut all of her scenes, and nothing would be lost. While the new Team Avatar's dynamics are bad for a number of reasons, Asami consistently gets the short end of the stick, being relegated to only having 3 contributions: having money, driving things, or being an object to cause conflict between Korra and Mako. This is frustrating because it didn't have to be this way. Hell, Suki came in the last third of season 3, but she was treated with more respect than Asami was. While Asami does get some cool choreography to show off her fighting skills, she never feels like she establishes her own place in the greater cast, but is instead perpetually kept on the sidelines. Asami is the one character we are constantly being told has a lot of things going on in her life, but we aren't shown any of it. Asami was supposed to be that character that embodied traditional femininity, while also showing that those weren't limiting factors. After season 1 though, she's basically Suki with more screen time and even more out of focus. However, she can take solace that she isn't the only member of Team Avatar the writers gave up on.
Maybe Opal is Bolin material. Thanks. Yeah.
So he's an idiot.
I know what you lot of you are thinking. Bolin is the best. He's super funny. And yes, I agree with both those statements. But that's kind of all he is. Bolin is incredibly likable, and that's the reason why he gets as much screen time as he does. But Bolin being funny is kind of the problem. All of his scenes have this shoehorned comedy element to them. He can never play a scene straight. Take his reaction to Korra kissing his brother. He cries, sad poor Bolin. But then it turns into this comedic ugly cry, complete with prima donna clenched arms. This is his first big emotional moment, and it gets treated as a joke. Bolin never grows as a person. He doesn't even seem to have any goals or motivations outside of being a nice guy. Now this wouldn't be a problem in another show with a lighter tone, but it is here. Avatar's greatest strength was that it treated its characters like real people, complicated beings with many facets to who they were. Bolin is great. I love his voice actor. He's always entertaining when he's around, but his life is a perpetual side quest, with all the storylines feeling like the creators wrote the joke first, then wrote the plot to get him there. Oh, let's have Bolin be a movie star. And then, I don't know, have him stop an assassination attempt. Oh, Bolin is in an abusive relationship. And then, oh, we play it for comedy and he's immediately dumped at the end of the season. I want Bolin to get his moment so badly. The guy is just getting crushed at being too good at one thing, and no one wants to take him out of that comfort zone. Now, Bolin's situation is enigmatic of the larger problem with The Legend of Korra, which is its inability to write subplots. Bear with me as I describe the mechanics of storytelling, but I promise it has a point. Stories are typically broken up into A and B plots. The A plot will be the primary focus of your story, meaning it will usually be about the lead and have the most number of scenes. The B plot is generally a parallel storyline headed by more secondary characters. Every story has an A plot, but not every story needs a B plot. The easiest way to understand A versus B plots is to watch American Dad, which has this formula down to a science. So for example, in one American Dad episode, Stan and his CIA buddies are on the run in Thailand. This is the main focus of the story, it's where most of the time gets invested, but occasionally they need to cut away to something else, so we move to the B plot, where the rest of the family is having a slow-mo race. There is zero stakes and exists solely for comedy. The A plot will usually end in some cathartic moment of learning for the characters, while a B plot will usually at best end on a joke. Korra's massive subplot problem is that it is incapable of telling a story where the A plot isn't centered around Korra, and on those few rare occasions, Tenzin. Unless the character is with Korra, odds are they are in the B plot, where they accomplish very little and don't develop. Now this doesn't have to be a problem. Characters can be relegated to B plots and still have some of the best development in the show. The problem with Korra is that it chooses to make its B plots not about the characters, instead using them to get to a plot point that will be brought up later in the show. But this has the effect of making almost all of them feel like anime filler. The worst example of this in Korra is actually in season 3, in Ba Sing Se, where Mako and Bolin rediscover their family, and we get exactly one super sweet moment of them with their gran, and then then absolutely nothing changes about the characters. The only difference is that Mako gives up his scarf, which is his last connection to his family. This could have been the start of a meaningful transition for his character, but then it comes to nothing as one of the family members reveals a rumor about where the airbenders they're looking for are. And this is almost all the subplots in Korra to a T. Season 2's entire middle section is a B-plot, with Mako trying to discover who bombed the embassy and Bolin becoming famous. These stories don't have to add to the main plot, but they should at least develop the characters, which just doesn't happen. Mako is the same brooding asshole with nice hair. Bolin could have grown from this experience, where we see him use his acting abilities to trick Esna into letting them go by confessing to her, but this is again treated as a joke by revealing that his feelings were genuine. It's like the story wants these characters to be irrelevant, and I don't understand why it wastes its supporting cast this much. And this show has Tenzin, so they can do it, but choose not to.
I swear to fucking God, I will stop being so polite. Get the fuck out of my sight before I demolish you. I can still fucking see you, Mini-Me!
If you haven't figured it out already, I am not a fan of this new Team Avatar. I said it in my Season 1 video, and I'll briefly restate it here. The original Team Avatar felt like a family, with bonds that you knew would last forever. You wanted to be a part of this group, to joke around with Sako or have fun with Toph, but you don't get that in Korra. At best, they feel like teammates. They'll probably still hang out, but most likely, they'll end up just being Facebook friends. The ultimate tragedy of this team is that they are constantly being separated, and they're never given a chance to grow or develop a stronger dynamic. It was easy in Avatar, because for most of the time, we only have the main 4 characters. But in Korra, we have a much larger cast. When it came time to pick characters to develop, and more attention was always given to other supporting characters. And the number one culprit of this is Tenzin. I think the writers like Tenzin too much. I say this as a massive fan of Tenzin, but looking back on the story, Tenzin probably has the second most amount of development in the show, which is great, but he gets it at the expense of Bolin and the other two. I'm not exaggerating. In the premiere, Tenzin gets a subplot about getting bullied by his siblings and being Korra's mentor. Episode 3, Tenzin gets a subplot about his siblings resenting him for being Aang's favorite, which we'll come back to. Episode 4 is about him and Ikki with some baby sky bison. 5 is him with his nightmare of a son. He's not in 6, 7, or 8, which are Wan's backstory. Episode 9 is about him eating humble pie about never going to the spirit world. 10 is about him finding out his daughter is gone. 11, he's in the background. 13 was about him and his siblings walking around the spirit world. He self-actualizes. Then 14, he's the one to give Korra a pep talk in her darkest hour. Aang's son gets a lot of time devoted to him, and it's some of the best character work in The Legend of Korra. But as much as it pains me to say it, I think he got too much of the spotlight. The fascination with Tenzin and his siblings is easy to understand. Tenzin is the closest connection we have to the original Avatar series. He is proof that the world has changed from where we last left the Aang gang behind. The writers knew this. The writers knew how much he would mean to the audience, so they put extra care into making him as real and fleshed out as possible. But at the end of the day, he's not the main character. Tenzin is the best member of the supporting cast, not just because he's great, but because there's no competition, with everyone else in the cast just getting scraps. And for all the attention the show gives Tenzin, I think there's one sticking point where I have to call BS. See, Bumi and Kaya, his siblings, both of whom are great, reveal that Tenzin was Aang's favorite, and he wasn't even subtle about it. Aang was super busy, so he couldn't spend as much time as he would have liked with his family. So when he went on vacation, he'd only take Tenzin. Yep, the nicest, most wholesome boy in the world would tell his other kids to stay home with their mother, and only take Tenzin to go koi surfing. Yeah, no, not buying that for a second. I would believe that Aang spent extra time with Tenzin to teach him about the air nomads. If that's what Bumi was complaining about, I would believe it. But if you're telling me Aang was out just having fun with his kid at the expense of the others, or that Katara would just let this happen, no, I don't see it. Human flaws or not, I don't believe it.
Hey buddy, how you feeling? Look man, you gotta finish reviewing the show.
I don't wanna.
Hey, come on, how bad can it be?
We will become the new Avatar. A dark Avatar.
Unalaq, the worst Avatar villain, period. Unalaq is a special kind of villain. He is both cartoonishly evil, yet also demands to be taken seriously. He lounges ominously in the shadows while talking about how he's the good guy. He represents the need for spirituality in the world, yet his actual goal is to become a god. But we are being over the head that his first goal was the real one and needed to be taken seriously. He's a fat bag of nothing who somehow succeeds at being full of shit. Unalaq is Ozai, yet somehow most of the cast doesn't realize he's evil from moment 1. The first 5 episodes of season 2 are so busy telegraphing that he's evil, they forget to make him pretend to be good. It's a chore to get through these episodes without screaming at your TV for everyone to see the obvious. He invades the Southern Water Tribe, and Korra supports him based on his whopping 0 charisma. There's naivete, but this is just stupid. The show goes out of its way to make it hard to root for Korra. Now, villains don't have to be outstanding. Some of them just have to be serviceable. Unalaq is neither of these things. And worse, he's obvious. The show honestly thought that having him give one speech about the decadence of the South Pole would convince us that he has some great noble goal, only for his grand plan to be ushering in 10,000 years of darkness. Are you kidding me with this cartoon bullshit? And they have the audacity to say 2 seasons later that he was right. Nearly every plot point Unalaq is a part of is ruined. And of course, all of them are topics that should be able to be deeply explored, but here they can barely even scratch the surface.
The snowman up where no man's without a treat. And watch this.
This is the basis for every Christmas movie not starring Santa. It's common because it's true. In the South Pole, a holiday that was once a religious festival meant to give thanks to the spirits and draw the two closer together has been replaced by consumerism and crappy fair games. The original meaning of the celebration gets lost as the culture evolves and changes, creating a conflict. Is it better to preserve the older traditions or have the new holiday take on its own special meaning? Not the same as the original, but important in its own way. In a world like Avatar, where spirits do exist, losing the original intent of the holiday could actually be problematic. Humans are now forgetting that they share the world with the spirits, and a symbol of understanding has become a holiday dedicated to self-satisfaction. A good setup, a good conflict, but all Unalaq can do with it is to browbeat everyone around him with how much better he is than everyone else. No spirits are ever seen to be negatively affected by the shift in humans, with those affected only being evil because of Vaatu, who's about to be freed thanks to planets aligning BS. It could have been way more impactful if they made the humanity's lack of spirituality and respect for the spirits the cause of Vaatu's prison weakening, creating a conflict where Unalaq is in the right and humanity needs to change. Perhaps even adding in local spirits having suffered due to the South's urbanization, unable to manifest in the real world, just like the Painted Lady. But nope, none of this happens. It's just Unalaq being a spirit-obsessed a-hole who orchestrated a spirit attack to trick Korra. Everything about this plot point is wasted potential, and it only gets worse from here. Did you know that the Water Tribes were reunited before Korra started? No. Is it very unclear even when the story starts? You bet it is. So for everyone who watched the original, this was the basic political setup for the Water Tribe. You had the Northern Water Tribe, which was the older, more structured of the two. Then you had the Southern Water Tribe, which has been shattered by the Fire Nation, but still exists operating in smaller villages. While other nations like the Fire Nation rule over all firebenders, they were the exception, not the rule. The Water Tribes functionally had little to do with one another, and there's nothing to lead us to believe that the North ever ruled over the South in any formal capacity. So at the start of Season 2, Unalaq is just walking around being grumpy how no one is respecting him despite being their chief, and creating a knowledge gap between the audience and the show. Now, a huge geopolitical shift can absolutely happen in 60-something years we weren't around to see. And this may seem like a minor nitpick, but it actually is way more relevant to the show than you would think. Because the show doesn't set up the fact that the North isn't, even in just a formal sense, the ruler of both tribes. It makes Unalaq's proclamations about being their chief seems whiny and out of touch. Like, sure, you may technically rule both, but there's no evidence to show the North has any real authority here, making the 2 episodes where he brings in the troops and says he's doing all of this for peace and unity completely nonsensical, with everyone sitting at home saying this fucker is invading. It creates a dissonance between what is happening in the show versus what we, the audience, perceive. The Southern Water Tribe has a debate about what to do with everyone being rightfully mad. There is no reason for us, the viewers, to not immediately go, hell yeah, toss these people out of your house. If they had succinctly established that the North was in charge, this overtly evil act, while still being evil, would have a sliver of justification, while also adding more context for the drama that's going on, and most importantly, make Korra's refusal to help just a little bit less infuriating. Now, onto the Civil War. The Civil War plotline could have been interesting, but it wasn't. Not even a little bit. The Civil War takes up about half the plot of Season 2, then is immediately forgotten once they reveal Vaatu. The question is why? Why would the show spend so much time building up this war only for it to not be effective at all? Well, the answer to that question is actually quite simple. It's not the point. When it's first introduced, the problem is not what is the South going to do. It's about Korra's faith in Unalaq and her daddy issues. After leaving the South Pole, everyone talks about the Civil War, but despite being the main driving force of the story, once in Republic City, it becomes about Raiko not supporting the South and a bombing that turned out to be Varrick trying to be a war profiteer. Every episode we aren't in the South, the plot becomes more concerned with its own thing than the reason it started in the first place. By the time the story returns to the South, the war is already over and Satan needs to be defeated. The Civil War is a mechanism to get the rest of the plot going, and it is always treated as such, with the exact expectation of being tossed aside once the bigger plot rears its ugly kite-shaped face. Speaking of which, oh god.
Enjoying those McNuggets?
Yeah, they're pretty good. I mean, the burgers suck, but at least I have the McNuggets to look forward to.
Yeah, just don't think about it.
Well, what do you mean, don't think about it?
Don't think about it.
Dude, what are you talking? Dude, not think about what? The origin story for the Avatar cycle was a breath of fresh air. After 6 episodes of frustration and bad plot beats, the audience is fully willing to give themselves over to the seemingly good, but actually quite toxic backstory that is Beginnings. Like all good poisons, on the surface, it's not vomit-inducing. Avatar 1 is the likable narrative diluent that makes these 2 episodes palatable. I have no issue with Wan as a character other than that in Beginnings, he is just aggressively Aladdin. Being voiced by Can Do No Wrong Steven Yeun certainly helped. That said, the extremely negative light that Korra has been shown in all season left me pining for any agreeable Avatar. So when I say Beginnings is bad, I don't include Wan in that statement. His personal journey from street rat to bridge between the worlds is a very organic transition. Growing up as a poor kid in a heavily stratified society, he learned what the worst of humanity could be like, without letting that cloud his vision of the good in people. He was a rowdy teenager who would sometimes give in to his darker desires, but could pull himself back from going too far. Then when he meets the spirits, after some initial hesitancy, he learns to think of them as a second family, learning that spirits are not the monsters he was raised to believe, making his desire to meditate conflicts between them a very potent story about love overcoming fear and chaos. This is the best part of these 2 episodes, and if it were just a story about him as an avatar, I would have no problem with it. Except he's not an avatar, he's the first Avatar, and the origin story for the Avatar is, in a word,
terrible.
There is no tale about light versus dark or spirits crammed into humans. The Avatar world has always stressed the idea of balance, not just in people, but in the world itself. Push and pull, water and fire. The scales of the universe naturally worked to bring itself into a state of harmony. The Avatar was a manifestation of this quest for balance, a specially gifted person whose duty it was to ensure that the world doesn't fall too far to any one side. Humans and spirits are presented as similar but fundamentally different beings. So in order to keep these opposing sides in harmony, a fulcrum was created to bridge the worlds. This was the basic assumption of the entire Avatar universe. It wasn't just a plot point or an element, but the very nature of the world distilled into a single being. When and where the Avatar started didn't matter. They had always been there. Rava and Vaatu are spirits that are supposed to embody light and darkness, locked in eternal conflict till Wan splits them apart and has to fuse with Rava to restore balance to the world. Or else a dominant Vaatu will plunge the world into 10,000 years of darkness. Okay, now, let's pick apart the cluster of symbolism and metaphors that make up these 2. The idea of having 2 opposing deities constantly being at odds with one another is a very common motif in early religions. It is present in ancient Egypt with the story of the sun god Ra battling the world-devouring serpent Apep every night. The Zoroastrianism, where the idea of duality is ingrained in the religion. The very heavens are divided between the god of evil, Angra Mayura, and the god of good and creation, Ahura Mazda. These provide the inspiration for many fantasy copycats in media. Rava and Vaatu also represent order and chaos. Their struggle is meant to cause changes in the world depending on who was winning the fight. Their struggle and design is a direct reference to Yin and Yang. And this is where the story completely misses the mark and forgot everything that they already told us. While it is appealing visually to make these characters be the embodiment of Yin and Yang, the story doesn't know what it's talking about. Here's a link to John Bellamy's TED Talk on the subject. Yin and Yang, while they do represent light and dark, it is a massive generalization to make this their defining characteristic, because they represent so much more. They represent the highs and the lows, mountains and valleys, south and north, fire and water, two extremes dancing around one another, bringing themselves into balance. For they are complementary forces, unable to exist without the other, because without light, there can be no shadows. The presentation of Rava and Vaatu's struggle is the antithesis for everything that they pretend to represent. Rava is treated as the ultimate symbol of balance. Her supremacy over Vaatu brings balance to the world, where he can only destroy and create chaos. Yin is held back by Yang, not its complement. Harmony is not achieved by balancing these two opposing forces, but by beating and locking one away. This isn't balance. It's not yin and yang. It's good versus evil. And at this, it relates more to Zoroastrianism than anything else. And drawing from many different sources is a good thing. But when you build a world composed of Eastern Taoist beliefs, to then make the crux of the universe based on a pair of gods that could not be more antithetical to everything the world's built on is folly. The origin story misunderstands everything about the world. It misunderstands the real world beliefs that it claims to profess. It borrows iconography without meaning. Even one of the most basic tenets of yin and yang, that within each side a little bit of the other remains. This shows how these forces are not absolute. And the climax of the story presents this idea only on a surface level, by having a little bit of Rava reside within Vaatu and had to be ripped out for her to return. A symbolism so obvious that anyone could get it and see what they were copying. Vaatu and Rava were a mistake, from their designs to their role in the story. But what Beginnings does to the Avatar is even worse. The Avatar is the bridge between the worlds. They were the universe's answer to the imbalance between spirits and humans. At least that's what we thought. Korra reveals that all this was a lie. Okay. Have you ever considered the arrogance of the word nature? Nature is defined as the phenomena of the physical world collectively, including plants, animals, the landscape, and other features and products of the earth, as opposed to humans or human creations. Meaning the humans are separate from the natural world. There's something so infinitely special about us that we exist above the rest of the world, dividing it between what we have and haven't changed yet. This is arrogance. To believe that we are separate from the world, and that we don't affect or are affected by the same forces. Even though we are born, raised, and die under the same sky, we hold ourselves to a different plane of existence than everything else. That is the Avatar now. The Avatar is arrogance. Man's arrogance. The belief that we can best solve the world's problems. The idea that the world is imperiled and saved thanks to the choices of one man. Now humans, spirits, and nature all bend to this one person. True balance in the Avatar world was a conflict between Rava and Vaatu, natural cycles between dark and light. But then one came and imprisoned evil, separating the worlds so that mankind could reign. No longer would they have to truly coexist with spirits. This isn't harmony, that's conquest. Beginnings damages the Avatar world, breaks it on a fundamental level. Rather than sharing the world, both sides are separate from one another until Korra makes the decision to keep the portals open. This choice is meaningless, however, as needing physical portals to access the spirit world is ridiculous, because spirits are supposed to be all around us. In the forests, in the oceans, spirituality was the recognition of this greater truth. But Beginnings made this a lie. Humanity was cut off from the spirit world, as the gates had to be physically opened for true spiritual understanding to embrace the world. We had to see it to believe it. Spirituality became reality, so that Korra could be the hero, which is all the Avatar is now. A human hero with a bit of God living inside them. An idea so absurdly Western that it makes the New York knockoff seem subtle. None of this had to happen. A balance could have been struck between the show the creators were making and the one that they made. Neither show is perfect, but while The Last Airbender celebrated its strengths, Korra revels in its failings. And the worst part about this is, we're only halfway through the season. This is everything that the season has been building to. All the bad backstory, the retcons, all so that we can have this. The Dark Avatar, a phrase that should only exist in fan fiction, but is now a part of the show. The idea of having a dark blank is a very common idea in media, popularized in no small part thanks to comic books and shows like Power Rangers. It's just too much of a money-making home run to not use it. You like this character, well, what if they were bad? You like this hero, well, what if they didn't have all those morals or ethical dilemmas? It's as transparent as it is cliche, but it can be used to great dramatic effect. But it comes in two very different flavors. The more effective use of this trope is seen in shows like Naruto, where the dark version of our hero is a manifestation of the hero's suppressed rage and negative emotions. When faced by this evil doppelganger, fighting proves to be impossible, and it's only by accepting him as a part of himself does the rage fade from his heart, and he is able to truly move on from his negative self. The other use of this trope is just straight copy and paste, where we see a version of our heroes but evil. Sometimes they'll be twisted reflection of the character's worst traits, where in other characters, they're just a different person in a black version of the costume. This is the version we got in Korra. Dark Avatar Unalaq is probably the stupidest thing to come out of my mouth since middle school. People have tried to defend this decision by pointing out how it reflects Yin and Yang, but having already gone over how badly the show misrepresents that topic, I feel like I don't have to explain it again. Though I will mention that if they really wanted to do this right, it would have had to do this topic with Kuvira, who is a dark reflection of Korra and her personality, but instead, let's just focus on the fact that the Dark Avatar isn't even a full avatar by the standards of the show. The defining characteristics of the Avatar is their ability to use all four elements. Unalaq can't do that. He can only use water. Learning how to master the elements is symbolic for the Avatar to experience the four nations, learning about their beliefs and philosophy, gaining wisdom as well as power. What does the Dark Avatar have to make up for this? Energy beams and tentacles. A character say this line,
"And together we will become the new Avatar, a Dark Avatar,"
and play it completely straight, like it's supposed to be the most intimidating thing in the world. This plot belongs in a Power Rangers film, not The Legend of Korra. People tripped over themselves to praise Korra for being darker and more nuanced, but then they have moments like this where I keep expecting the villains to twirl their mustache. And then the show 2 seasons later will go on to say Unalaq had a point. He doesn't have a point. Everything he's ever said is generic bad guy lines with a religious angle. He's not trying to free the spirits. He's releasing 10,000 years of darkness. This isn't Legend of Korra, it's fucking Jackie Chan Adventures. Unalaq and the Dark Avatar is that one bad idea you throw out as a joke, only for everyone to go along with it. I just can't believe that it made it into the show. But little did I know, they had an even dumber one.
Hey, do you like chocolate? Yeah. Do you like chocolate bars? Okay, where are you going with this? I was just gonna go in this whole spiel metaphor about how chocolate is good, but too much of it or just in the wrong places, it just does not work. So you're talking about like how there's too many anime tropes in season 2 of Korra. Oh yeah, exactly.
The kaiju fight.
Let them fight.
There has been one long debate in the cartoon/anime community over whether to consider Avatar: The Last Airbender an anime or a Western cartoon. While it wasn't made in Japan, it has more in common with anime than it did many Western cartoons at the time, not to mention its heavy use of Japanese and Asian cultures in general. But while this debate will never be settled, and I could personally care less, Korra desperately tries to be anime. How else do you explain the inclusion of mechas, kaiju, laser shooting, cringe comedy, and fricking harems? None of these things are bad on their own. In their own series, they can be quite enjoyable. But when they get crammed in all at once, we start to have a problem. Nowhere is this more apparent than the finale of Season 2, where Unalaq turns into a Statue of Liberty chucking kaiju, equipped with giant laser beams. He then has to fight Korra again, who is using energy bending to become a giant woman, who also has laser beams. Now, to me, this doesn't fit. I don't like Republic City or the advanced technology, but I think the show does a good enough job advancing the world to make it feel like a continuation of the original. But giant kaiju battles, I'm drawing the line. This doesn't feel like Avatar. This doesn't even feel like Korra. This is Ready Player One levels of one-upsmanship, where the story tries so hard to be bigger and cooler than everything that came before that it breaks the stratosphere of unbelievability, and no one is sure where they're going anymore. And while this may work in a show like Gurren Lagann, where ridiculous bullshit is built into the fiber of the show, Korra was always pushing to be more grounded, with a hard magic system giving us a strong idea of what could and couldn't be possible. This dissonance leaves you feeling more confused than anything else. While there is some precedent for giant spirit kaiju, just because you might be able to explain it doesn't mean you should. Many of the more outlandish parts of Korra had their origins in The Last Airbender. The Fire Nation had tanks that could climb up mountains and mile-long drills. The show was fantasy, but it would also dabble in steampunk. Just dabble though. Korra broke that seal open and dumped in the whole bottle. So now, not only is the show taking place in the 1920s, but it also has mecha tanks, power armor, robot hummingbirds, and giant robots with laser cannons. Some of this technology is within the range of what we've seen before, but all of it is too much and pushes the show into this janky steampunk territory. When the show drops these elements for more fantasy-based storytelling, there is a reason that fan reaction tends to be more positive. But what about the kaiju battle? Because I already know some people have already started commenting that Aang did the same thing when he merged with the koi fish. Well, it was perfectly fine then, and it all comes down to presentation. The moment Aang entered the Avatar state, it was presented as a special event. Even within all his other uses, he is not just channeling the power of the previous avatars, but he's also challenging the power of the ocean spirit. He's using their wrath at the death of the moon spirit to push back the Fire Nation. The scene is treated as a moment of divine wrath and a comeuppance for Admiral Zhao, whose disregard for the spirits is put in direct contrast for Aang's respect, proving that the Fire Nation was wrong and that the spirits are not a force to be trifled with. Making the scene even more powerful is how, as a season finale, this is the moment Aang steps up to be the Avatar. He's not only keeping the peace, but maintaining the spiritual balance of the planet. Compare this to Legend of Korra, where there is no reason for any of this to be happening. There's no thematic reason for Unalaq to transform into this spirit giant, or to destroy national landmarks. When Vaatu beat Rava, it causes him to grow bigger. So when he destroys Rava, him growing to gigantic size might be what they were trying to go for, but he's not a spirit anymore. He's part human. While spirits can change the physical form of those they pass through, the Avatar is special in that it's supposed to be the balanced merger of the two, retaining a human shape but with the powers of the spirit, making this scene come out of nowhere. Then, as if to one-up itself, they have Korra energy bend herself to create another giant who can go fight the Dark Avatar. At this point though, she is completely human, and by the show's own logic, everyone else in the room could be able to do the same thing as her. While this might boil down to personal taste, I stand by this being the worst climax in Avatar. People can bend the elements, they can shoot lightning, and even cause explosions with their mind, but there is just something about two 60-foot spirit giants throwing laser beams at each other that just takes me out of it. This show jumped the shark and it killed all the excitement that I had for season 3. There's a lot of stuff that I do appreciate about season 2, from its animation, the fight scenes, yes, even Varrick, who does get grading afterwards. There are things to like. But before we go, there are still a few more other points I want to bring up, and I'm just going to go through all of them in a quick lightning round. I adore Varrick, but outside of his comedy, he's wasted as a villain. Korra losing her connection to the other avatars is something I don't personally like, but I think it works for the story. This is supposed to be the fresh start for the world and a reset for the Avatar state, and it's a good way of showing that there is no going back. And when Rava dies, it's shocking, and the darkest hour that comes after it being one of the best in Korra. The reveal that Unalaq tricked Korra's dad into attacking the Spirit Forest was really lame. It showed off how evil Unalaq is, but also takes the responsibility off of Tonraq for his actions. Flaws make for interesting characters, and we shouldn't be so quick to scrub our heroes of blame. You can have a past and still be a good guy. I especially found the judge knowing about Unalaq setting up his brother from years back to be completely out of nowhere. There's no reason he should know about this. Korra's mom has a gravelly smoker voice. I found this hilarious. Esna and Eska are highlights of any scene they're in, but we really only need Eska, who is kind of just a bit too much of Mai and Azula, and while she's not an original character, Audrey Plaza kills the voice acting. Also, Eska's relationship with Bolin is abusive, and it's played for comedy. This would be really uncomfortable if the genders were switched, but I ugly laughed through all of these scenes.
Oh yes, I am so glad you understand.
Nothing that is, except marriage. We will wed at sunset. You may express your joy through tears.
Tenzin's conversation with his dad is amazing, and I wish we got a quick snip of him speaking to each of his kids. Bumi and Kai are great. I wish Mako and Asami had this level of wit and personality. The scene where Bumi talks to a statue of his dad is heartbreaking and solidified my love for Bumi, giving him more depth in one scene than Bolin gets in 3 seasons. Iroh being in the show made me tear up, but I have no idea what he's doing here. Let him rest and be with his son. His part of the story should have been filled by Aang, but rumor has it the writers dislike the spirit mentor thing. But don't quote me on that one, I tried to find the source of that comment, but I couldn't find it again. The Zhao cameo is great. The spirit world is too much like Alice in Wonderland. It looks beautiful, but it's also generic. Wang Shi-tong has another great cameo, and I love the gruesomeness that the professor from the original just died down there. This season, she decided to promote Jinora to be the important one of her siblings, and I think she's only okay. She really picks up more in season 3, but here she just comes off as more of the MacGuffin child. Leaving the spirit portals open was dumb. It worked thematically, but by all accounts, no one really wanted this, not the spirits, not the humans. Also, I don't like how the show treats the Avatar state. It went from God mode to Super Saiyan. It gets more unimpressive the more it's used. The old explanation about how it was the combined experience of all the previous Avatars was way better than the new one, where it's just the light spirit power-up. I also found frustrating how this season Korra just knows how to use the Avatar state. It's great for displaying how disrespectful she treats the spiritual side of bending, but I call BS that she can just control it, when every other piece of media in Avatar talks about how difficult it is to master. Korra's a prodigy at the physical side of bending, but mastering the Avatar state was always more of a spiritual matter. I always loved the character designs and the animation. Its use of color and soundtrack are honestly way better than almost everything in The Last Airbender. Season 1 had its bruises, but it set up the cast in the new status quo wonderfully. But Season 2 has always felt like a reset, not a sequel. It's so concerned with setting up the next 2 seasons that it does every character a disservice. No one goes unfucked by this season, and no one suffers this more than Korra. I have always liked her, and I disagree with most of the complaints that get thrown at her, but not in Season 2, where even I have trouble rooting for her. This season wanted to be so many things. I truly believe if Season 2 was cut out from the show, Korra would have been looked back on a lot more fondly. But it's hard to look back on something fondly when the things it did right are way less memorable than the things it did wrong. Still good. You know, I have said a lot of things about The Legend of Korra, but I felt like before I leave off, I need to say this last one. The Legend of Korra is a great show. I didn't make this video so I can say all of Korra is trash, but Season 2, it's bad. It has always been bad, and I think we all can recognize that. And while I do think a lot of people are going to take this as, oh my god, he totally hates Korra, we need to go rail into the comments. Go ahead, I don't really care. Korra was a show that I felt consistently made missteps. It had great elements, and not always great execution. Sometimes I would have great execution, but then some of the wrong elements. It all comes down to personal opinion. I will always love Korra. I will always love Avatar, but not Season 2. Season 2 is immediate skip for me, And even the joys of having to watch Season 3 are not worth having to power sit through Season 2. But tell me what you guys think. Am I crazy for disliking Season 2 as much as I do? Or is it really the Antichrist? Let me know down below. And hey, thank you all for watching.